we're looking at floating through the Star Wars universe. We have people who have actually contributed to creating this thing that we love, creating this universe from totally different perspectives up here. I'm actually going to let each of them introduce themselves, and then we're going to go into, I'm going to just do some back and forth questions, myself and them, let them tell their own stories, have a little game in the middle, and then end it with some Q&A for you guys. So I'll cue you guys up for that. We'll be lining up behind this camera, going that way. I'll tell you guys when to do that one. But starting off, we'll start over on the end. Sir, can you please introduce yourself and tell everyone why you're so awesome?
Hi, I'm Taylor Gray, and oh wait, no. But I play him on TV. Yeah. I'm Tom Kane, and I talk in silly voices for a living, and for cartoons and movies and television shows, occasionally in the produce department, and. Yeah, I mean, you've heard me, oh my gosh, going back 25, 30 years. I started doing voiceover work professionally when I was 15, and kind of never stopped. My most notable stuff is for 22 years, I've been doing most of the Yoda stuff you've heard, that whatever Frank didn't do. Actually started out doing C-3PO, was the first character I did for Star Wars. And still occasionally do it when Anthony doesn't. But I'm Akbar, have been for 5 or 6 years as he got older, and now is not with us. But so yeah, just a lot of different things. Of Clone Wars, I'm the opening narrator. Empire at War as the planet Ryloth falls under attack. And of course, the Jedi Master, yes. But, and Admiral Yularen, Master Kenobi, you've got to control your Padawan.
I was hoping to save those for later.
Oh, don't worry, there's plenty. So anyway, that's what I do. I talk a lot of stuff. Although mostly, cartoons is fun, and it's what gets you all the attention, and stuff. But most of the time you guys hear me, you probably don't even know it's me. My actual... day-to-day voiceover work is as movie trailers. So I do tons of stuff for the Disney and Pixar films, and most of the time you hear me in trailers, it's, let's see, what would be recently? Oh, Johnny Depp is Sherlock Gnomes. Starts Friday at theaters everywhere. Rated PG-13. Tim Allen is the Shaggy Dog 4 from Walt Disney Pictures. Starts Friday at theaters everywhere. Starring all your favorite Disney characters. So. But yeah, when you go to the parks, I'm the voice of the monorail system, and when you walk in, I'm the guy that goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Disneyland, the happiest place on earth." And so yeah, a lot of that stuff. So. Disney's been very good to me, and now that they own Star Wars, they're my biggest client by a long shot. So. But there's a lot of fun stuff coming. You'll be very pleased with the new parks and stuff. There's some ridiculously fun things going to be in the new Star Wars lands. So.
Awesome. Anyway,
so yes.
And gentleman in the middle, I think you've had some contribution to this universe, correct?
One or two. I'm Brian Muir. I started in the film industry in 1968.
When you were 2.
Oh, thank you. So I worked 48 years in the film industry, worked on over 70 films, 10 Bond movies, 4 Harry Potter, all 3 Indiana Jones, Guardians, I won't bore you. But I suppose I'm sort of most known for the work that I did on Star Wars, creating Darth Vader, the Stormtrooper Armor, the Death Star droid, ZZ-3, and finishing work on C-3PO. Enjoyed working on that. I started on it in January 1976. It was a low-budget movie. We, or as the crew there, thought it was going to be a poor movie, but how wrong we were. '77, we went to see this crew showing, and this same pessimistic crew watched the opening sequence, and it got a round of applause. And at the end of the film, everyone was blown away, and it got a standing ovation. And it's the only time I've ever seen it at any cruise showing I've ever been to. So it shows that it was a special film.
Excellent. Sir?
I'm John Jackson Miller. I have been a Star Wars fan and a comics fan forever. Kind of got into this because I worked for Comics Buyer's Guide, a magazine, for about a decade. I still do a comics website called Comicron, which is comics history. But I moved to the other side of the camera, as it were, about 15 years ago. Wrote Iron Man for a year. Iron Man got me. Star Wars, I wrote the Knights of the Old Republic series for 5 years, which is out again from Marvel. Then also started doing novels as well. I wrote the Kenobi novel, came out several years ago, won the Scribe Award for Best Tie-In Novel of 2014. That got me the New Dawn novel, which is the first act in the whole Rebels TV series thing, and it's also the first novel in the new era of continuity or canon. More recently for Star Wars, did Canto Bight, which ties in with Episode 8, the casino planet there. It allowed me to put to work some of the research I had done losing money in casinos for many years. And maybe I can write that off. Did my first kids comic for Star Wars, just came out, Star Wars Adventures Annual. It's my first Luke and Leia story after about 15 years. Finally got to write Luke and Leia. The issue also has the first appearance of Jackson the Rabbit, who has been banned from Star Wars for 40 years. So he's back in. And then I've done some work for some other franchises. Halo, my latest hardcover, is just now out this last week. Mass Effect. Did a lot for Star Trek here recently. I wrote the 50th anniversary trilogy for Star Trek. It's a lot of books. I'm in from Wisconsin. Please buy them so I don't have to carry them home.
Awesome. So, yeah, as you guys see, we got totally different perspectives here on creating and doing stuff with this Star Wars universe. Brian, I want to go to you first here. So you're sitting there in the 70s, and George Lucas knocks on your door and shows you a painting from Ralph McQuarrie and says, "Can you make this?" How did Vader happen?
Wasn't quite like that. Yeah, I was approached basically from John Barry, the designer, to start on the film. My first job on the film was the Stormtrooper Armor. Being that there were so many Stormtroopers needed, it had to be something that many people could get into. So they produced a 5'10" figure in plaster, which I sculpted on, and it was designed that there were many sections that married into the next, which meant that it would fit on anyone from 5'8", which means that the joints would close up to someone of 6 foot, and the joints would widen. And after that, it would look bad because the joints would be so wide. So, but as long as they were of the right build, it would fit the 50 people that they actually wanted to go into the Stormtroopers. So that's how That's
how the start was.
And then, well, funny enough, they said to me, they didn't know, I was young, I was only 23, they didn't know my capabilities. And they said, "Oh, we'll give you 6 weeks' work." I ended up staying for the whole film. So they obviously liked what I was doing in the way of Vader and the Stormtroopers and the other characters.
How different was the initial sketches or paintings that you had to what that final creation? Because you're able to tweak things. You're able to change the design a little bit, change the look of it for a lot of those early Star Wars designs. So are they totally different? How would you compare that?
Well, the concept art that Ralph McQuarrie did of the mask and the helmet would not have worked whatsoever. So it was John Mollo that came up with a tiny sketch about so big, just from one angle, just a simple line drawing. And from that, they moulded Dave Prowse and produced him in plaster, so that I knew everything that I sculpted would fit back onto Dave Prowse when they moulded it and cast it. But the mask and the helmet, I had a fair bit of input into the way it looked.
That's excellent. Awesome. Mr. Miller. So you've done so much. That Knights of the Old Republic run is huge. The novels. How much freedom do you have with the characters that you can create? So you can tell the people here. So when you have an idea for Luke or Leia, when you have an idea for Obi-Wan, do they let you kind of just run with it? Or is it like, do they come to you and say, I want you to make a story about this?
I do a panel at Celebration on writing in a shared universe. And one of the things that we talk about is to try to treat Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever you happen to be working on, if it's a shared fan fiction universe or something. I treat Star Wars as a national park. Basically, I try to leave it better than it was when I found it, and I try not to leave my footprints and fingerprints on everything. If you walk in saying, hey, I've got an idea, Luke and Leia, they were actually triplets, and there's a third kid out there somewhere, you're going to be told, no, don't do that. That's probably not something you should do. Incidentally, they do tell you things you shouldn't do every so often, and we never will tell you what those are. Because what will happen is, I'll say that at a panel, oh, we're not supposed to show this character or whatever. People will say, Lucasfilm has said not to show this character. They're obviously going to do a movie with this character, or they're going to do whatever. And that shouldn't come from me, and that shouldn't come from anybody else. And, I don't know. So
any dirty little secret thing you've snuck in, like for instance, a niece's name or anything like that you've been able to put into your creations?
My grandfather served on an LST, which was one of these landing ship tanks, or as they used to call them, large slow targets. These were these things that carried tanks everywhere in the South Pacific. And they didn't have names, they just had numbers. His was LST 560. There are 560s, the number, all throughout my work, just all over the place. And then later on, I did a Knights of the Old Republic storyline where Zane Carrick, the hero, was drafted, and the ship that he was basically supposed to be on was the Star Wars equivalent of one of these things, where it was designed to just carry and drop these vehicles, which you see in all these movies. So. Again, there's, I try not to put too many people's names in things. That's called a Tuckerism in fiction, because the very first time I did it was in Knights of the Old Republic as well. I had a text page where I needed some names of some criminals, and so I jumbled up some of the names of my friends from high school. There were Wikipedia pages about those characters the very next day, and I realized I can't do that.
Mr. Kane. So I think the most consistent role you've definitely had has been Yoda for Star Wars through the years. Now, when you're given a script for Yoda, and you got to add the feeling, you're the one that puts in all that emotion into it. Do you find yourself still going back to the source material of the original movies to see his expressions, how he actually would sigh and things like that? Or is it really at this point your own, and do you just run with it?
Both. Yoda has changed a lot over the years, partly because Frank Oz changed his voice as he aged. And that has caused, not problems, but that has caused some adjustment. Especially, when George was more hands-on and calling all the shots on a day-to-day basis, he would hear me do something, and it wasn't what he had in mind from a time frame point of view. Like I had one of my more bizarre moments in my life, never to ever be repeated.
We're not recording. Don't worry.
No. I mean repeated, like it's never going to happen again. I was actually announcing, it was a live announcer for the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award for Sean Connery. So when it was done, I was packing up my stuff, and I thought I'd cut through behind the stage. It's in the same theater where they have the Oscars, so I knew that place well because I've announced 4 or 5 Oscars. So I I'm just going through now the darkened stage, and right there in the middle of the stage, just sitting there empty, except for this one person, was George. So I'm just like, I walk up and I'm like, not entirely sure he would know who I was from my face. And I said, oh, hey, it's Tom Kane. And he goes, oh, he said, my Yoda. Yes, you're Yoda. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I was the announcer, for the show. And he goes, oh, that was you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh. And I said, what are you doing? Why are you? He goes, oh, I'm just meeting some people. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I want to ask you, are you happy? This is probably, maybe only 6 episodes into the Clone Wars. And I said, is this going okay? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I was going to call Dave about this. He goes, yeah, Yoda's just not quite right. And I'm going, well, that's the end of that career. And he said, yeah. He goes, you sound too much like Ep. Whatever, 3 or whatever. And I'm like, well, what do you, honest to God, that's the first time I'd ever heard anything referred to as Ep, whatever, episode 1, 2, that to me was, and I'm like, oh, what the heck is an Ep? And then I went, oh, okay. And I said, well, what did you want? He goes, I want it more Ep 5. And I'm like, Empire? And he goes, yeah. I said, oh, okay. He goes, yeah, we'll have to re-record. So we actually did. We went back and re-recorded the first 3 or 4 episodes of my stuff as Clone Wars. Not all of it, but a lot of it, to make it more. And it worked, because every, ambush was the pilot. And to this day, I think a lot of fans will say that was so Yoda, But but the part of this is that, again, never to be repeated. As I'm sitting there having this discussion, we're at this point, and I'm like, okay, well, great. And all of a sudden behind me, I hear this, I told you I'm done. I'm too old to be doing this anymore. And then I hear this, no, Indy's got to have a dad. We've got this all worked out, whatever. And then I hear another voice going, we've got it down to the point where we only need you for 2 weeks. And if we can just do 2 weeks, whatever. And he's like, no, I've told you I'm finished. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And up around me, I'm face to face with George Lucas, and all of a sudden, I am this, here's the crowd. Here's who he's been waiting for.
Yeah.
Sean Connery, Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, and Callista Flockhart. And they're trying to browbeat Sean Connery into agreeing to do Indy 4. Oh. And he's just having none of it. He's like, he was hoarse from the evening. He's like, no, I've told you I'm finished with this stuff. And I'm just sitting here looking around going, okay, I've got all the kids I need. I'll gladly trade both of them for a camera. But at that point, I'm like, I'll just leave now. And George is like, yeah, you'll leave now.
I love how you started that story with, oh, I've announced the Oscars 4 or 5 times.
Oh, well.
And he just casually throws that one out there because that's something normal people do.
That's the big fake boy thing. Live from the corner of Hollywood and Highland, it's the 84th Annual Academy Awards. And now here's your host, Seth MacFarlane. Whatever. Anyway.
Mr. Mira. Actually, anyone who wants to jump in on this one. Star Wars and the fans have proven to be a occasionally rabid fan base. Does anyone have a fun story, a memory, something at a convention or anywhere else? And if the answer
something that
is
still
no,
gives you nightmares?
Yeah, something that still gives you nightmares. We get a lot of the actors and actresses who have like, man, this thing happened this one time. This guy wanted me to sign his foot. And I'm like, what? And it could be a no. That's perfectly fine.
I don't know if it's a nightmare. I've told this story before, but I am not a cosplayer. My very first convention, I was the world's saddest Indiana Jones. People thought I was an armed accountant. It was horrible. And so I just don't dress up. And after I'd done Knights of the Old Republic for a few years, my fans in my hometown show convention back home wanted me to dress up as one of my characters. I said, well, I won't dress up as any of the characters you have in mind. But if you bring me a life-size uniform of Griff, this character of mine, I'd be happy to wear that. And I thought I was out because Griff is 3 feet tall. And I thought I was out. And then I showed up at the convention the following year. And they presented me with a 3-foot-tall Muppet, life-sized, of Griff, that I ended up having to carry around for the entire convention, which was kind of good because we actually had a puppeteer at the convention who was willing to do a reading with me at the same time, which is kind of cool. But yeah, the drive home was interesting because I had to put him in the child seat in the back. And the woman at the KFC as I was driving through said, "That is the ugliest child I have ever seen in my whole life." And that Muppet is still scaring my daughter every time she goes into the office where it is. But so not a bad experience, but a weird experience.
Yeah, for sure. Gentlemen, nothing?
Well, my experiences with fans have always been very, very positive, but occasionally it gets a bit strange. One guy that had a real fixation, he brought some drawings in for me to see, and I wanted to encourage him. I said, yeah, they're very good, and keep it going. And he stood there for about an hour just staring at me. Oh. And in the end, I got quite freaked out by it.
Please don't stare at the talent for an hour.
But yeah, mostly it's been very positive for me.
That's excellent. Mr. Kane, do you do a lot of conventions?
Not a lot. I'm still full-time, voiceover guy. I average anywhere from 2 to 5 recording sessions a day. So I can't leave. It's very difficult for me to go out of town. So summertime is slow. So that this works for me. But I do maybe four a year. I've not had anything particularly bad happen. You get your share of people who sit and stare at you for 30 minutes and like going, is there spinach in my teeth? What did I do? But yeah, but yeah, every once in a while, I'll get somebody who, thinks that I have that I actually have the Force and can somehow wave my magic lightsaber and hand them a career as a voiceover person. There's one guy that really did. He was pestering me for the whole weekend, just basically saying, I want to get into doing cartoon voiceover work, so, can you call somebody and get me a part? And I finally was like, if I could do that, don't you think I'd call that person and get me a part? Before I'd get you a part? And that's what it finally took for the light bulb. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess so. I'm like, yeah. So when I've got so many parts from all my phone calls that I can't work anymore, then I'll put you right on the top of the list. So that's like, yes, I'll just put you in a cartoon. It's like.
I did have a quick creepy moment like that, which is actually a teachable moment here for everybody, which relates to what you just said. I got home from a signing once, and I looked in my bag, and there was this Darth Maul branded flash drive, and stupidly I put it into my computer, and it had the guy's novel. He had written his own Star Wars novel, and there was a note on it saying, "Can you please, Mr. Miller, get them to publish this?" And this is beyond my power and scope, and it just doesn't work that way. And also, these things are invitation only, and by contract, the publishers can never look at your fan fiction ever. And it just doesn't work that way. And I just had to send a nice note, but I think I ended up keeping the flash drive.
All right.
Again, because this is something another author explained to me, what people don't understand with authors is it's a legal thing. My agent in LA, they get manuscripts all the time because they represent Hollywood screenwriters. They don't even open it because legally they're like, if I look at this and 5 years later a movie comes out that has a 1-page similarity to a page in this, they're going to sue and say, oh, well, you helped put together this movie, and that's a character that and they can. So yeah, it's just policy. They don't even open the envelope. They just return to sender, put some postage on it, and send it back. So.
All right, we're gonna have a little bit of fun really quick. You guys know Trivial Pursuit and Star Wars? So I have.
This is going to be very embarrassing.
It's going to be very embarrassing. I have an unopened Trivial Pursuit Star Wars here. We are going to ask the gentleman on stage questions.
Oh, jeez.
Until they each get one wrong.
Or right.
Until they get something right. And then guys, would you be willing to sign this and give it to someone in the audience?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
And I need to talk to you later if you're doing over-published stuff. I need to put some more Vandar Tokar in. So
I have Vandar in this book here.
very cool. That's actually
Which
one
is
that,
available for sale downstairs, or no, actually not
yeah.
downstairs.
See, that's the benefit of what
Just right as you're going to the right.
that's
Yes.
the benefit of what I sign. It's just little pieces of paper. You have books.
Oh yeah, very good.
No, actually, that's another thing that George did that was just weird. You know, he wants, people are always asking, you know, is there going to be a Yoda movie, a standalone Yoda? The answer is no, at least not that I know of, because everybody, you know, if it came from George on down to Disney now, it would ruin it. What makes Yoda so special is that he's basically the one of a kind. You don't know where he comes from. You don't know what happened. You don't know how he got to where he is. If suddenly we go back and see a pimply-faced 15-year-old Yoda getting stood up for the prom, well, there goes the magic.
But we do get the other Yoda, Vandar Tokar.
Well,
right
the thing that's cool is when I did the voice for Vandar, George was adamant that he not talk like Yoda. The voice is similar.
You know,
it's still a yes, except there's not one syllable of backwards talking. It's just absolutely straight on. And I was like, why? And he's like, it was just basically like, well, so even then.
It's a neighborhood Yoda lived in.
Yeah, why? So why does Yoda talk like that, but not Vandar Tokar? And it's just one more thing we go, well, I don't know. Maybe Yoda got hit in the head when he was younger. I don't know.
Actually, what you're saying there is a bit like Vader. They filmed me actually sculpting Vader. It will never be shown because it will ruin the magic.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. I mean, Vader is such an iconic, probably the most iconic, like, portfolio or outline of a character in sci-fi fantasy, period.
Yeah.
It's just such an iconic piece right there. So, yeah, that makes sense. So, let's do some trivia. We're going to start right here and work our way down.
See, I use Wikipedia.
Yeah.
This is
Well, I'm giving you harder questions because you work with
Stop
the actual content. All right. I know half of you are going to know all the answers. Please, let's let them have fun. What planet strikes Luke as something out of a dream?
something out of a dream.
He says something out of a dream.
I would suppose Dagobah.
chance.
Correct. You get to move on to round 2.
Oh, joy. Tell him what he wins, Don. Do you do a Don Pardo?
Oh, tell him what he wins, Don.
I actually based the voice of a character because they always ask me who the audiobook character should sound like. I have a character in Rebels that's based on Gary Owen.
Well, that's... Gary and I were friends for 30 years, and when I got Professor Utonium, before I actually took the part, I told him, I said, I kind of am blending you and me together, but it sounds like you. And he goes, well, as long as you do me well. But yeah, you take half me and half Gary Owens. He was the guy on Laughing, the fickle thinker of faith of war goes to beautiful downtown Burbank. Well, that's Professor Utonium. It's like Bubbles, Blossom, Buttercup, you can kick Mojo Jojo's butt tomorrow. But yeah. Anyway, I'll have to sign all your Vandar things.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of them. All right, Mr. Muir. Who asks if the name Lando refers to a star system?
Oh, jeez.
You've got me there.
Name someone from Star Wars.
I will say something that I went to a convention in Dublin, Ireland, and they decided that they were going to have all the actors and myself, and we were going to have a quiz against kids, 10-year-olds. They won hands down. We were hopeless. Sorry, what was the question?
Good tactic.
Yeah, I like this.
I could keep this going.
He's an hour. He's waiting for Tom to be like. Which character refers to the name Lando as a star system? So this is in the original trilogy.
No idea, sorry.
He's not a system, he's a man.
So it
I'm
is?
out, thanks.
It's Leia Organa.
All right. Mr. Kane, who's the first character shown firing a blaster at a Mynock?
At a Mynock? Well, that was Han, wasn't it?
It is Han.
Han, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, we're just going to do 2 more questions, and we're going to move on to Q&A with you guys. Oh, that's too easy for you.
Stop that.
How many attack runs down the Death Star trench end in failure?
Oh, gosh. How many runs end in failure?
Yes.
Only red leader besides. I think just one actually fires on the chute.
According to Trivial Pursuit, it is 2.
2.
Who's the other one?
Argue with them.
Interesting.
I don't know.
But only one other run got to the point of firing. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right, we'll see.
I was 9 years old.
So we will see if we have our first ever grand champion if he gets this question right. That's easy. All right, we'll do it anyway. Who unwittingly destroys the controls to extend a bridge across to the Death Star's chasm?
Han? No, I don't know.
Incorrect.
Oh.
It is Luke.
Luke, oh.
Anyway,
So where's a 10-year-old when I need one? There you go. There she is.
all right, who thinks they know really hard stuff? Someone in the audience. This is to win. First hand was up.
I kind of do.
You kind of do. All right, how about I ask the question and then we'll do hands up. Okay, I'll ask a question. So this is going to be for the autographed Trivial Pursuit by our 3 guests. They are in episode 4. They're in the trash compactor. Luke is talking over his little thingy to R2 and 3PO. What is the number designation to that trash compactor that he gives them? Sir?
38?
Incorrect.
No.
Sir?
386327.
Almost. You're off by one number.
8675309.
Now you're dating yourself.
Well, which is incidentally, we can now have that viewing order of the movies. People ask me that's what I call the Jenny viewing order. It's 8. Now that episode 8 is out, when the next one is out, we'll be able to do 8675309, and that's Rogue One. So
Boy Wonder, before we move on? Nope.
D8507.
No, it's close. 326-3827. That's
Oh
close.
my God.
What do we got? We have. No, we're going to keep it one more, and whoever gets this first hand up wins. Who does Count Dooku refer to as my old friend? Is it correct? It's Yoda. All right. Would you like them to sign the game board or the instructions?
Or the lid.
You want to do the lid?
the lid is metal.
Off of that lid.
Well, we could do both.
I would take game board.
Let's do that game board. All right, if everyone wants to, who does want to ask the question, start queuing up right here. I'll bring the microphone to you.
There you go. Greetings.
Go for it.
Brian, this one's for you. When you're ready.
I'll be with you in about 5 seconds. There you go. Sorry.
Thank you, by the way, for coming all the way out here. Your work is phenomenal, and I know we're here just for Star Wars, but I wanted to know what your favorite sculpture out of all the movies you've made. Dragon Slayer, by the way, being one of my favorite dragon movies of all time. Thank you for that dragon. What's your favorite sculpture? Like, what do you look back on and go, wow, that was my best?
There's so many nice pieces I've had the pleasure of actually doing. It's really hard to pick a favourite. But I will tell you one that I really enjoyed doing and did look nice. It was I don't know if you remember the opening sequence from Indiana Jones and the Temple of
Oh,
Doom,
yeah, of course.
where you get the Paramount Mountains and they pan out,
Yeah.
and then there's a gong with a dragon across it. Well, I spent 2 weeks doing a beautiful dragon that went right the way around the whole thing with the Paramount Mountains in the middle.
I remember that.
And I was pleased with it. And the art department come and said, sorry, we've got the scale of the mountains wrong. We can't use that. So I haven't spent 2 weeks doing that I was really pleased with. I had 2 days to do what you see on the screen. Dragon going straight across, simple dragon with the mountains underneath.
That's a shame.
But yeah, so that was a nice job. But as I say, there's just so much work.
Do you have pieces in your home from the movie?
No.
None.
The only bits that I did bring home for the kids, there was a thing on, they were both from Bond movies, and one was, Bond was on the skating ring, and there were 3 guys with these masks on skating around him,
Okay.
meaning him harm. And I took a couple of them home for the kids, got them cast out, and they got fed up with them, so I just chucked them way down the dump.
Next time you decide to chuck anything, can you call?
In Octopussy, there was a scene where they're on the train, and the Bond's there, and Bond's hiding behind a gorilla's mask and suit. Well, I did that, and I took one of them home again for the kids. They got fed up with it, chucked it in.
I'm going to give you my phone number in case you decide to get rid of. Just let me know.
I still have a few carvings that I did at college as an apprentice that I still have at home.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
I was on the Paramount lot regularly for 10 years because I was the voice of Hard Copy, which was a Paramount television show. And I was there while they were dismantling and dumpstering everything to do with Star Trek: The Next Generation.
So what is in your home?
I have a 4x8 section of the Borg ship.
Awesome.
It's just on the wall.
I'll tell you a little story there, actually.
It all ended up in dumpsters.
Yeah, on Star Wars 1, my brother was the head of department with the Stags, and my son, who was at university at the time, had his summer period off, and he got a job. And his job was to burn everything that was coming off the sets. And that was it.
Very 2001.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they don't exist anymore, but you know that they used to have cells for animation. Every frame was a cell, and there's a guy named Eddie who's now retired, but he started working at the age of 17 for Hanna-Barbera. And his job for the first year he was just like a gopher, but every so often they would say, oh, the warehouse is full, go dump season 2 of the Flintstones or season 3 of Scooby-Doo, and he would literally fill up pickup trucks full of boxes of the original cells and just take them to the dump. And he said, I can't count. He said hundreds of thousands of cells from the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo and all of those. I'm like, oh, God, can you imagine?
It's grand because you would have been gone to college with that.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller, thanks again for coming up with a Grand Admiral Ray Sloan. What was it like to actually come up with her, and did you ever dream that she would wind up what she is now?
Okay, Sloan is a competent Imperial character in the New Dawn book, which is the prequel to Rebels. And as she's like the only character who survives the book, I had said to the folks at Lucasfilm, this would be a good character to be a running character through all of the future novels. And in fact, that's what they did with her, and I got to do a couple more short stories with that character as well. The whole idea, the premise behind her was that it struck me that there had to be some true believers in the Empire who were not aware of the whole Sith thing, meaning most people. And so, I wanted to do something where she was part of sort of the first generation of, and what would end up being the only generation, of Republic Academy cadets that would be matriculated through the Imperial Academy and would look on what the Empire is doing as reasonable and natural and sensible, but I also wanted to have her, and this is a major part of the book, battling with the weird political stuff that's going on in the Empire, because the Emperor has all these favorites out there, and then these sort of mystical figures like Darth Vader who are out there to become enforcers. And you know, I wanted to write something about kind of that first generation. I've said this before too at panels. I have a master's in Soviet studies. I would have had a doctorate, except the Soviet Union collapsed on my dissertation. And so I've used that material first when I got my first gig at Marvel writing Crimson Dynamo, which was the Russian Iron Man. And then I've used it quite a lot in Star Wars because, Star Wars presents the writer who's actually caring about the details of running one of these big societies with a problem, which is that how do you transform what was in the movies a mercantile republic, a trading collective basically, into this totalitarian military state in under 20 years, which is what you've got before Star Wars. And I thought about it and said, oh, well, that's actually they did it in Russia. It took 20 years and the deaths of 20 million people, but they were able to transform that into a country that could win World War II. And so I went back and I looked at some of the young Soviets in the 20s as well as I was designing her. So again, deeper kind of thoughts than you normally get in this kind of space opera, but I steal from everything.
Very cool. I think that's the film industry in general.
Exactly.
Steal from the best.
Yeah. So
Shakespeare stole, so everybody can steal.
Okay.
Actually, talking about Russia, for GoldenEye, I had the job of sculpting all the big Russian statues.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that's great.
And Bond's there it's a night scene and he's got 4 red lights on his chest. But it was funny because I wasn't actually at Leavesden Studios, which is now the Warner Studio. I was back at a workshop that I had at the time. So Stalin, who was 20 foot high, went out in a lorry in 3 sections. And just like that lorry going down the road with Stalin in white polystyrene must have turned a few eyes.
So this question's for Mr. Kane.
Yes.
From any franchise, what character have you not done yet that you would like to do, and how would you do that character?
Well, I mean, I personally think the voiceover job of the century in my lifetime, of course, is Vader. I've done a few really crappy Vaders for Lucasfilm projects. Nothing of any note. Mostly just things behind the scenes for fun and someone's some executive's birthday party. But I've met James many times over the years. We had the same agent for 10 years, and he's a phenomenal man in many ways, not just his voice, but. I've always thought, man, if I could go back and modify my throat some way, Vader's the one I've always thought would be cool. But Yoda's not crappy either.
Afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks again for coming out. I'm just curious, from a writer, sculptor, and a voice perspective, obviously, there's a lot of options right there for the future of the franchise. They're talking about, they do all the individual films, the saga films. I'm just curious, what direction would you like to see the franchise go? What kind of stories would you like to see be told as the franchise goes forward?
Ones that would pay us money, I would suppose, would be the...
That's always a good thing. I'm hesitant to say much because I know more than I'm supposed to talk about, but there's a lot of stuff in the works. I don't think it's much of a secret, but at the moment there are at least 9 feature films in various stages of development. There are individual stories that are planned that have been announced, some that have not. Not Yoda, at least as far as I know. There's just an amazing amount of stuff that's going to be coming out over the next 10 years, and it's just going to be, awesome. There's just, This is going to be the golden era of Star Wars over the next decade. So a lot of fun stuff coming out. TV as well.
Every time somebody talks about a Kenobi movie or something, my social media thing lights up. Yeah. And I've actually now got a clip that I just post in response to anything. It's Anthony. I don't know if you have an Anthony Hopkins or not, but him in The Remains of the Day saying, "I'm sorry, I'm unable to help you with that question because honestly, I live at the end of a dead-end road in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin. I am not near the water cooler. If I knew anything, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And if I don't know anything, why ask me?" People seem to think that they can prod people on social media to, oh yeah, by the way, here's the entire publishing plan for the next 15 years.
Well, and he's right. He may literally live at the end of a dead-end road in Wisconsin. I'm on a more open road in Kansas. But metaphorically, we're all at the dead-end road when it comes to this. We're like the last people in the universe they're going to send a memo to about, oh, wait, here's the plan for the next 10 years. Yeah, we're not to denigrate what we do for a living, but we're the hired help. And unless you're sitting, in the Presidio, offices or in Burbank, at Disney headquarters, anybody that tells you that they know what's really coming down the pike, if it's not Dave Filoni or Kathy Kennedy or someone like that, they're full of crap.
Yeah. But they'd very quickly be sacked.
Yes.
But I will be in Hollywood next weekend.
Yeah.
Actually, this is cool, just because it's cool. I found out last week one of the characters I created in Iron Man is in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So they're bringing me the premiere. It's the character that Walton Goggins played.
You've had 2 so far.
I've had 2, because also, Christine Everhart was the reporter in Iron Man 1 and 2. And both are and her and Sonny Birch are both from my first Iron Man storyline, so that's kind of cool. That's I actually had to Google, well, what do you actually wear when you go to see one of these things? And I found out they're not looking at you; they're looking at they're looking at Robert Downey Jr. They're looking at Paul Rudd.
I've been to 5 premieres, and I don't think I've worn a button-up shirt to any of them because no one cares. No one knows who I am anyways. I'm a voice. So, yeah.
So in different ways, you've all had influence on the creation and the evolution of characters, whether it's through vocal tone or actually creating them, make them what we look like. How do you give feedback in this shared universe where characters live beyond any of you? And what happens when the character goes a direction you didn't anticipate as someone else picks it up?
My year on Iron Man was erased in one panel by the next guy. But you know what? I'm sure I erased other things by other writers. And one of the fun things about comics, and specifically, it's serialized, and you can keep changing and keep changing and keep changing. In fact, the history of comics has pretty much been the generation after the baby boomers undoing all the stuff that they did, and then the next generation being nostalgic for it and bringing it all back. I think, and I got to kind of experience this by writing the first book in the canon, which made everything else legends. Although what we say about legends is legends, all the previous books may or may not be true, because legends like King Arthur or Robin Hood, parts of those things may be true. Whatever Lucasfilm waves its hand over and decides is part of the reality of the movies or the TV shows or whatever, gets back in. This stuff is kind of fluid. I've got 50,000 comics. I think maybe I have one bookshelf that's currently in canon for Marvel or DC or anybody else, because everything changes, but we understand this is how it goes.
Actually, having just brought up King Arthur, it just made me think. I was out in Ireland on a film called Excalibur.
Mm-hmm. Oh, little fun.
And I carved a 22-foot high dragon, gold dragon, for outside of the castle. And John Boorman's wife took a fancy to this dragon. She wanted it in their 10-acre garden in the Wicklow Mountains. And all of a sudden, it disappeared out the studio. Someone got a 22-foot dragon past security and out the studio. And she never did get her dragon. It was found in a scrapyard 6 months later in the middle of Dublin. So, just a little story aside.
Well, I have a question for you too. Dark Crystal 2 just got red or green lighted. Are you going to be a part of that?
No, I've retired. Rogue One was my last picture.
Oh.
And we've moved to the camp.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, Dave Miller here. Great name to have. Sir, for somebody who's, it was hell on wheels going through that master's degree that I just finished and, using bubbles and, when you're creating those novels, do you use bubbling techniques? Do you look at other stuff? Do you write start to finish? Do you go in the middle? Do you go, that's a good idea, and then expand on that? I mean, that's a big question, but,
I had no creative writing classes in college at all. I was a journalist. I hit deadlines. I worked for weekly news. I worked for a daily newspaper. I worked for weekly and monthly magazines. I learned how to basically go out and get what needed to be done, writing to other people quickly and swiftly. People talk about using all these various theories in writing. How do you come up with, starting with your theme and your first act and second act and third act structure? Honestly, what I do, I call almost like jazz. I basically will put 3 or 4 scenes together that I would really want to see, and then I make them happen logically. Now the problem is when you're working with licensed properties like Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, the people who own those properties need to have some idea what you're doing all along the way to make sure it doesn't conflict with other things. So you're in the plotting stage a lot. And where you do have to provide that. I hate that stage. I am currently in that stage for 4 different things that I can't announce right now. But and I'm just like, I want to get to the writing because I want to do the dialogue. I want to have the actual interaction between the characters.
So do you use Mac or do you use IBM?
I go back to the Apple IIe, which still works. And my son, that's not what I use, but I'm all Mac in my house because that's what I've been on forever. And my son is actually writing programs in machine language for the Apple IIe. It's very weird.
All right, gentlemen, to close us out, is there anything you want to promote that you guys have coming up that you are allowed to talk about, of course? Whatever you guys want to close with, you each got a minute or two. Have fun. We'll start at the end, Mr. Kane.
No, nothing I can talk about. But like I said, there's a lot of fun stuff coming out. So in every medium you can imagine.
About how many projects are you on right now?
That I'm currently working on, or just that?
Or just wrapped.
Oh gosh, half a dozen.
Cool.
Various characters. Some of it's stuff in the parks. Some of it's TV shows.
Very cool.
Lots of things.
Mr.
And
Mira,
I may or may not be telling the truth about any of it. I don't know.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. You can't say anything. In fact, on Rogue One, the day I started, we put it on Facebook that it started on Rogue One, and it just went viral. It went everywhere. And that evening, I had a phone call from the production office saying, "What have you put on your site?" I said, "Well, nothing. Just that I've started on Rogue One today." They said, "Get it off." And that's how it is. You sign a contract like that with 10 or 12 signatures in. So even now, I can't speak about Rogue One.
Even after the fact.
Yeah.
Wow.
As mentioned, much of what I'm working on I can't talk about. I can say though that I do know that we will be getting a third volume of the 3-volume Knights of the Old Republic set at some point from Marvel. Volume 1 and 2 are downstairs, or not downstairs, over at the booth. Please take them because they're very heavy, and also because I have a running bet with my table mate. We're trying to see whether we're going to sell any of the Star Trek books or not, even though it's mainly a Star Wars appearance. It is the best thing I've ever written. I went away for a year and a half to write the 50th anniversary trilogy, and even had to work with a Klingon interpreter to help me get all of that right. So, and so I mean, and the audiobook is even better because basically he recorded almost a Berlitz tape for the performer Robert Petkoff to do. But I will sign your books either in English or in Klingon because I've had to learn. Bortash beer, jablu dich rech, kachuch nech. Revenge is a dish best served cold.
All right, everyone, big round of applause for our folks.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end. You can subscribe here, so subscribe to the channel. There's more videos off to the left. Mr. J says, don't forget to ring that bell button for more notifications.